can be seen in the same fashion with existing festivals of the people that existed for thousands of years, hijacked by political movements. The Roman Empire has adapted many festivals to celebrate their goddesses of the Roman religion. For example, Dionysius was celebrated on this day, and Aphrodite was celebrated on this day. Arcadius, this festival was more and more popular, and this was adapted by the international as their day.
So hello everyone and welcome to the weekend meeting with Sanal Edamaruku. I am Shubhi Sinha, heading the youth wing of Rationalist International, and we have been conducting these Zoom conferences and Clubhouse successfully for quite a few years now. I am happy to welcome all of you. Please note that in this session, our Zoom and Clubhouse will both go on simultaneously. So once Sanal sir is done with his presentation, we would move on to a question answer round where we will take up questions from Zoom participants as well as the participants from the Clubhouse. Uh, Everybody who's present in the Zoom meeting, I would request you all to keep your videos and audios shut both for recording purposes. Only when you're asking a question, we would ask you to turn both of the things, which is the audio and video. The pattern for the meeting would be as regular, where Sanal Edamaruku would be speaking for an hour, and then we will limit the questions to 30 minutes or maybe a bit more. So now coming to the topic, Mayday before becoming Workers' Day. International Workers' Day, also known as Labor Day in some countries and often referred to as May Day, is a celebration of laborers and the working classes that is promoted by the international labor movement and occurs every year on May Day, which is 1st of May. The date had been chosen by the American Federation of Labor, and May Day subsequently becoming an annual event. There is some history about this. Why is it celebrated? The celebration is done in different ways in different countries. So, to help us understand more about this, I would like to welcome Sanal sir with us.
Thank you very much, Shubhi. Thank you, everybody who is attending this meeting. Today is May Day for most of the working people in the world. It's also a Flowers Day in some other countries. It's the Students' Day in Scandinavian countries. It's the beginning of the summer, and festivities are on in many other countries. But why this particular day is considered the World Workers' Day or International Workers' Day, and who started it and why? The popular narrative, popular story, popular fact that we know is very simple, that this day was chosen to be the International Workers' Day in 1889. There was a reason for that. The reason was there was a struggle in United States, in Chicago, for getting the working time limited to 8 hours per day. This was a struggle which was starting on 1st of May, and on 4th of May, there was some violence against this struggle and a lot of people were killed. So this was a very hard thing for the socialist or communist movements of those times in 1800s. And they decided in the Second International to celebrate a day for the workers' uprising, to work energetically for establishing a festivity around the theme of the working class. And they decided to opt 1st of May. The main attack on the workers was on 4th of May, but they chose 1st of May. But there was a reason for that. The reason is, the official reason is, of course, they decided, the Second International decided that that shall be the International Workers' Day. And once they decided, that was the day of the International Workers' Day. But before that, from times immemorial, this day was celebrated for some other purpose. And for the same purpose that's celebrated still in many other countries than those countries which are considering themselves as a proletariat dictatorship or communist parties ruling countries, or the major political movement is communist. When social democratic parties try to consider this as the Workers' Day. In fact, what is this Second International? And is that connected with the Communist International that was established in 1919? This was in 1889. And the Communist International was established in 1919. What is it? All these internationals, isn't it confusing? So the history of the internationals is also very interesting. So I have, one has to understand the background of this Communist International and the working class international movements to understand the whole phenomenon. So this particular day gets more an importance when you understand this process. But it's also important to understand how common festivals are adapted into political themes or religious themes as per the convenience of the political leadership or the religious leadership upon their whims and wills. For example, the Communist International is also called the Third International, which means there were two internationals. So international is a terminology that was used for something like an international organization of the workers, socialists, communists, and anarchists. Practically, that was the basic set of people. This set of whole people, they had their first international, long back, and the international decides to commemorate certain days, raise certain ideas, and further forward the great goals that they have been fighting for. So the Workers' International had nothing to do with the later international, Communist International, or Comintern, with Soviet Union has started in 1990. If you go a little back about that, so in 1889, when the Second International was held, it was 3 years after the incident in United States. It was in 1886, the general strike started in United States for limiting the working time as 8 hours. And communist movement was not, in establishment at that time. There were three major groups which were working towards the interest of the workers altogether, mainly the socialists. Then small groups of communists here and there, because the idea of communism was coming up slowly. And another set of people known as anarchists. The French anarchists have been a major force in the political scheme of those days. Many people understand the word anarchism with the English word anarchy, which means total chaos. But anarchist movement, the political anarchist movement, is something totally different, which spoke about rights of people. And there have been a lot of radical people in the anarchist movement, and many prominent political leaders call themselves anarchists. For example, even contemporary political leaders or political figures who are not politicians, like Noam Chomsky, calls himself an anarchist. And the anarchist movement speaks about a liberal idea, which is against the so-called neoliberal ideas, but fundamental freedom, freedom of speech, freedom of all liberties, and individual liberty at the fullest form of it. Political authority is not the most important thing. The people and their rights are the most important thing. The individual is the key. That's the key idea of anarchism. Whereas on the socialist movement, it is society that's the key. These are the basic big divisions between the anarchist movement and the socialist movement. And communist movement is, in a way, a part of the continuation or an evolution of the socialist movement. But these groups all work together. The social democrats, the socialists, the communist groups, the anarchists, these were all groups working towards the interest of the workers who were very heavily exploited during the Industrial Revolution. They've been working for very long hours, because the more hours you worked, you could produce more. The more hours the machines worked and the more the mills worked, there have been more profit. And the owners of the mills. Industrial Revolution was also producing a lot of products, and the production was all based on the running machines and the people working with it. The machines will work unstoppable. I mean, you can, till you switch off, it works, or till you get heated up, it works. But humans get tired after some time. They need to take rest. They have to sleep. But that was nobody's concern at that time. The concern was getting more production, which means more profit. The profit was getting accumulated, and for that, the workers had to work longer and longer hours. So the whole socialist movement or social democratic movement demanded for limiting the working time to 8 hours. Earlier it was 12 hours, sometimes it was much more than that, 14 hours, 16 hours, but they wanted it to be limited to 8 hours. The mill owners, the people who invested money in the production industry, found it a very unacceptable argument that they need production and these people want to limit the production time. That's not possible, they said. So there was an interest of the capital. The capital or the wealth of the nation or wealth of the industrialists were all at jeopardy with this movement. So therefore, there was a political cooperation between the industrialists as well as the political leadership everywhere. And this was suppressed down on 4th of May in 1886. 3 years later, when the conference, the international was called with an official name. Marxist International Socialist Congress was the name of the Congress organized by the so-called international at that time in 1889. They decided this should be the day. But this was a day, they had a very interesting discussion during this Congress. That is what I wanted to focus upon. You see a similar pattern with political parties as well as religious organizations. We all know that Christmas, for example, was a festival of the sun worshippers before the so-called story of Jesus Christ, so-called period of Jesus Christ. Long before that, the sun worshippers identified this day as a day of the revival of the sun, because the day was becoming shorter and shorter and shorter, sometime till 25th of December. The Gregorian calendar was established also before the so-called period of Jesus Christ. But this particular day was identified because this was a festival which was celebrated all throughout the Roman Empire. Especially the Persians, who were worshippers of Mithra religion, they have been worshipping sun, and they have been using a symbol of cross as to symbolize the rays of sun, and they use olive branches in cross shape to symbolize sun, and they carried it on this day. When Emperor Constantine decided to adapt different festivals into the Roman fold, into the faith fold, he said this would be the birth date of Jesus Christ, which was nowhere mentioned in Bible. Bible itself was codified during his time. He has invited many people who had different versions of this same story, and accepted commonly acceptable stories and rejected a lot of other things. And the contemporary, the New Testament that we all know has been established at that time. And this became Christmas. Similarly, Easter was another festival of the equinox. So this was also taken by the church and called it as a festival of Jesus Christ, his resurrection. But still the old tradition carries with the rabbits and the eggs. And there was another festival in Egypt, which is known as the festival of Istar. So then there was another goddess in the present day UK, which is known as Thor. These goddesses were considered the goddesses of fertility. And this was the season when, after long winter, the plants would be coming up, the leaves would be emerging on trees, and life would be reactivated, and rabbits will be running around, and chickens start laying eggs, which symbolizes reproduction, regeneration, and a new life beginning. Well, that was taken as the resurrection day of Jesus Christ. There is no mentioning in any of these legends that this was this day that Easter would be there, and this was this day that Jesus Christ was resurrected as per the story. Same like the Christmas story. So the similarity that I wanted to show, the parallel that I wanted to show, was how the existing festivals of the people were hijacked by religion can be seen in the same fashion with existing festivals of the people that existed for thousands of years, hijacked by political movements. Because this May 1st was important. This was celebrated for centuries and centuries and centuries by the people in Europe all around. And it was also celebrated as the beginning of summer. Easter was something like a mid-spring festival. Life begins there. And summer is the time of festivities. Unlike in hot countries like India or the Arabian countries, summer is the time of celebrities in Europe. It's a lot of celebration all around. And people are happy. They can go out, they can go for long walks, and there are trees with a lot of leaves, and there are a lot of flowers. And that's time when life becomes very active. So this day was also considered the day of flowers. So this was also called the day of flowers, day of beans, because beans are produced also at this time, and also the day of the beginning of summer. So in the Roman goddess Flora, the goddess of all flowers, was also celebrated during this day. And in Italy, this was called Floralia. That was the name of the festival for a long time. And the Roman Republic adopts this. Like many other festivals were adopted, they have adopted this as this was before the adaptation of the Christian religion by the Roman Emperor Constantine in the 4th century. The Roman Empire has adapted many festivals to celebrate their goddesses of the Roman religion. For example, Dionysius was celebrated on this day, and Aphrodite was celebrated on this day. These are the two goddesses which were considered, every 3 years, there will be a festival of Dionysius and Aphrodite in the month of May. And also, there will be a lot of dancing all around and singing all around. People used to drink a lot all throughout the night before this particular day. And this was generally accepted as a day of celebration by the whole Roman Empire from the very beginning of it. This tradition we have seen changing into when after Christianity came into Roman religion, or Christianity was adopted by Roman religion, they have transferred the whole festivals into different names of in the stories of Jesus Christ. But this festival still remains as a festival of summer at one side and festival of flowers. And then this was the day which later was adopted by the international, second international. So their discussion was, we should adopt a day which is not very much identified with any religious group, but still celebrated by the people. But the same way religions have identified popular days as their days, we should identify a popular festival as our day. That was the thought. So the festival, which was started by Roman Empire, which was during the reigns of Honorius, Arcadius, this festival was more and more popular, and this was adapted by the international as their day. They connected this to an incident that happened 3 years before that, but not on that date, but on 4th of May, and they brought this festival connected to the Workers' Day. Well, nothing wrong about that. Many people would do it. Many cultures have tried it. Religions have tried it. Political parties have tried it. But we have to always understand that these days are, valued by a lot of people. And they would consider this with the great emotional feelings from religious festivals as well as for political festivals. The political festival was established because a new political culture was getting formatted at that time. From 1700s, we see a dramatic change in the whole world. The traditional ideas of nationhood changed. We have seen the American Revolution happening. The traditional stronghold of the British authority has gone, and the United States of America got established. They got first time a written constitution without a monarch, which spoke about republic, which spoke about democracy, which spoke about elections, which spoke about human rights, which spoke about separation of state and religion. Imagine that. That was one major change. After that, we have seen the French Revolution, which overthrew the powers of the monarch as well as the religious authority. The church and the monarch were in coalition at that time. They were together at that time. And together, they have been in a conflict with the interest of people. They were interested to amass wealth. They were interested to control the people. They were interested to maintain their authority together. The uprising of the people have overthrown not only the monarch, but also the authority of the religion. Catholic Church, modern times, got the biggest blow with the French Revolution. France became a model secular democracy. The first blow, I would say, was the Protestant movement, which challenged the fundamental ideas of the Catholic hierarchy. And second major political blow was the French Revolution. This was the time set, the American Revolution, the French Revolution, and the uprising of the workers' movement, industrial revolution, which caused a lot of conflicts at one side and a lot of wealth at the other side. And on the other side, colonies have been getting established, and there are more expansion of the political power of European authorities. Spain and Portugal declined as global powers, and Britain and France emerged as major political powers. And we see the Dutch Empire also was establishing its roots all around the world. New order, a new structure was emerging all around the world. Along with that, new ideas and new dreams and new aspirations came up. And the workers' movement, the socialist movement, and even the communist movement was an expression of the great aspiration of equality that was offspringed by the French Revolution. That was a success, and that was initiated by some of the greatest minds of those times. Jefferson in the United States and Thomas Paine, who wrote the great book, which is not, even spoken about very much, a small handbook, Common Sense, that opened up the American Revolution spirit. Then he came to France, and then he ignited the spirit of revolution there in France, along with Voltaire and Rousseau. And this was setting a new climate in all of Europe. And all of the, in America, in Europe, everywhere, the reflections of this new change started coming. But not only there. In Europe, the major powers had colonies all across. In Asia, in Latin America, in many parts of Africa, they had colonies. But at least in Asia, in many parts of Latin America, the idea of revolution, of American Revolution, of French Revolution, has inspired a lot of people. A lot of people got the idea to get liberated from the colonies, the authorities in the colonies. The independence movement and the liberation movement, the freedom struggle started in different parts of the world. They were all inspired by the great stream of thought that was coming up in Europe. The socialist movement, the social democratic movement, and even the communist movement was also an output of these great movements, which was initiated by Thomas Paine, Voltaire, Rousseau, Jefferson, and all these great minds. Now, coming from that, the second international, the first international, well, the international it's an organization of various different groups intended to have a common program with a common goal and make an international presence of the whole thing and maybe a dominance on the whole global situation. That was the general idea. But they didn't speak about that in that form. They speak about defending the rights of the workers primarily. That was the first two international. Now, to understand it better about the whole process, one has to go a little forward to see what happened to these internationals. There is a third international after this. After 1815, what was the year? After the 1889, that was the time of the second international. A third international was established. And how was that established? That was very interesting. The second international met again with the initiative of Soviet Union. Soviet Union was established in 1917, and that was the first success of a revolution with the ideology of communism or socialism. And they had great ambitions. They got completely euphoric. By 1919, before this 1917 revolution, there was in 1916, the second international met and it decided to dissolve because its original purposes were not tuning to the present movement of those times, because they didn't want to cooperate very much with the anarchists, number one, and the social democrats, and they wanted to have a new set of ideas going aggressive than the social democrats. Even the Russian Revolution, the overthrowing of the Tsar was not done by the communists. It was done mainly by the social democrats. And it was an internal revolution that overthrew the social democrats that the communists got into power. They were in minority at that time, Bolsheviks. Bolsheviks were in minority, and Mensheviks were overthrown in the Grand Alliance, and the communist parties got into power. And before that, in 1916, the Second International was dissolved. Now, after the first years of the establishment of the Soviet Republic, in 1919, they decided to call another international, which they called the Third International. In continuation, they claim that it is the continuation of the earlier internationals. The First International of socialists and workers and communists and anarchists, and the second international of the workers and the socialist and socialist Congress. That was dissolved, and now the third international was established in 1919. In interesting positions that they have taken. So, you know what, there was the second Congress of the third international made a very aggressive resolution to understand what was the dream and goal of Soviet Union at that time. One has to listen this one statement that was made by the second Congress of the third international, or which is also known as the Comintern, Communist International, they call it. The third international became not Workers International, Workers International or Socialist International. That became the Communist International. But they had a very aggressive dream, which can only be compared with Muhammad's aggressive dream of establishing the whole world as an Islamic republic. Till the last man falls to Islam, the great fight has to continue, is what Muhammad dreamed. He wanted every country to fall under the flag of Islam, spread Islam till the last man turned into Islam. That was the spirit of Muhammad. Here you see the same spirit, which can be compared only with Islam's growth or Islam's ideas. This is a resolution, the second Congress of the Communist International, the third international, otherwise. It resolved as follows, that the Comintern resolved in its second Congress to struggle by all available means, including armed force, for overthrowing of the international bourgeois and creation of an international Soviet Republic as a transitive stage to complete abolition of the state. So the communists, by principle, believe that the state should wither away. That's the many people, the present day communists do not know that communists did not believe in the state. They say that their opinion is, their point of view is, there are many things that are existing now which have to completely vanish when a communist society emerges. The state should wither away, the families should wither away, and private capital should wither away, and a people's society should finally emerge, which they would call communism. So they really believe that they would like to establish the classical idea of Marx and Engels, that the states have to wither away, and before that, there's a transition period. And during this transition period, the whole world becomes Soviet republics. By all means, by using weapons, by using armed forces, by using violence, you defeat the entire world and make the whole world as one single Soviet republic, Soviet Union. Imagine that. Very ambitious dream. Defeat the world, control all the governments in the whole world, and call that as Soviet Union of the world. That was the plan. That was the resolution the Communist International passed, which is one of the most aggressive, violent, and most disrespecting the nationalities and governments of other people and other cultures. They wanted to use force, not by convincing them. The same way like Muhammad wanted, by using the sword, here by using armed weapons and forces. Very clear resolution, very clear objective, and that continued till 1943. Till 1943, this resolution was in order. The Communist International maintained this position, that they want to overthrow anything that was connected with the capital or the bourgeois that they called, and overthrow all these governments and make the world a huge Soviet Union. Annex the whole world into the big Soviet Union. That was the goal. This was actually ended. This was officially dismantled only in 1943. And there was a reason for that. It was this resolution, it was this position that Soviet Union has taken, that they would use undemocratic ways. They would use the use of weapons. They would use the idea of overthrowing governments. They would use their force or forces that they will support to destabilize governments and make favorable governments and make them all part of the huge Soviet Union. That was the official position of Soviet Union, which completely damaged the whole idea of freedom and equality that the communist socialist movement wanted to absorb from French Revolution and American Revolution. It became an idea of hegemony, of total destruction of the global culture, to bring it into a single-faced global view. Absolutely undemocratic, absolutely irrational, absolutely hegemonic, absolutely totalitarian. That was the idea. That turned the whole world against Soviet Union. It was isolated. And the Iron Curtain practically came into being. Iron Curtain is a term which Churchill has used, that you would not know anything that happens in Soviet Union. Everything is controlled, every information is controlled. It's presented as the globe's most successful land, and everything is peaceful and happy, but only filtered information would come out. The greatest idea that came with the American Revolution, French Revolution, which was freedom of expression, free speech, and freedom of public opinion, freedom to criticize authorities, were all suppressed in this output, this stream of the revolution. So the Communist International, the workers' movement, became a tool of oppression on the other side. So this was dismantled later in 1943. This was dissolved. The International was dissolved in 1943 by Joseph Stalin. One of the best things that he has done. Stalin has done a lot of bad things, a lot of some good things also. One has to acknowledge that. He has built up the Soviet economy with the 5-year plans, which is something which was very much needed for Soviet economy. There was no planned economy there. He built up institutes of science at one side. And on the other side, he suppressed people. He was a totalitarian leader. He was a dictator. But on the other side, during the Second World War, his political allies, the first part of the World War, his ally was Hitler. There was an agreement between Russia and Germany that if the one country is in an aggression, the other country would not interfere. So when Poland was taken, and where 1 million people were killed there, which was just next door of Soviet Union, they did not react because there was a Stalin-Hitler alliance at that time. But later, that changes. Soviet Union became an ally along with United States and Britain. The trio that won the Second World War included United States, UK, and Soviet Union. But this antagonism, that any country that they would cooperate with, they would like to overthrow their governments and establish a Soviet republic there and absorb that into the big Soviet Union, was still a political position that Stalin had till that moment. For securing this alliance, they decided to end this Communist International. So Communist International was dissolved in 1943. So one would see there is another person who would claim the continuation of the International. His name is Leon Trotsky. Trotsky was the leader of the Red Army, which took over the power of the political power in Soviet Union. The Russian Revolution was completed by the Red Army. Red Army was led by a close colleague of Lenin, and whose name was Leon Trotsky. Trotsky had the idea of freedom of free expression and freedom of the people and democratic process, which was in contrast with the ideas of Stalin. There was a power struggle between Trotsky and Stalin. And after Lenin's death, there are many stories that there was an effort to eliminate Trotsky, but Trotsky escaped from Russia and he finally reached Mexico and he was living there. And there he established, after leaving, he established the Fourth International. The Trotskyist movement, it's a kind of communist movement, but very democratic, liberal, and they don't believe in revolution, with violent revolution. So they believe in an idea of permanent revolution. And this idea was popular in the academic circles for a long time. But Leon Trotsky was assassinated by an unknown person, a person who visits him and uses an axe to kill him. And later it is all well known that that was an agent sent by Joseph Stalin. So Trotsky is no more, and that's known as the Fourth International. The Trotskyite movement is known as the Fourth International, which is not a very popular movement, but you know a lot of people, very famous, were interested in the Trotskyite movement. For example, Christopher Hitchens was part of the Trotskyite movement. Many people do not know that he has an affinity towards the communist ideas at one side and the American political leadership. That's a very interesting combination. The Trotskyites are anti-Soviet and anti-Soviet policies, but they are for the workers' interest at one side. For example, Christopher Hitchens supported the Iraq war. And before that, he had a clear alliance with the Trotskyite movement. That's just to explain the evolution of these internationals. These internationals practically became the vanguard of the whole idea of the workers' movement. And this workers' movement, where did it lead to? That is another interesting thing that many people are very curious about. For example, one major revolution that happened following the Russian Revolution, with the ideas that has been inspiring people from the First International and Second International and Soviet Revolution, came in 1940s, the Chinese Revolution. Again, it was an overthrowing of a government, and they spoke about the proletariat taking power and the Communist Party taking power, and almost the same idea of political power being used as a way to carry forward certain ideology, like the medieval religion would do. The mission of the medieval states was to take forward their religious goal. Here, the mission of a state or a government is to take forward an ideology. But this ideology, in most cases, was only a convenient tool to convince people. Anything was justified in the name of ideology, like anything was justified in the name of religion. The Roman religion, the Christian religion, the Islamic religion, everything. All these religions tried to justify their actions, or the empires tried to justify their action on the basis of their faith. Whatever they have done was in the interest of the faith, they said. And whatever these people do in these political empires, they claimed it was in the interest of the working class. And what would be the outcome with such a thing? You know, who are the most exploited workers in the whole world now? Where are the people who are working for 8 hours now? In most of European countries, people work for not 8 hours, they work for 7 hours. And there are still arguments going on that they should not work for 5 days, but 4 days. There are many political leaders in Europe who are even in the premiership and other positions who politically argue that they would prefer a 4-day week, because the more leisure you have, the more productive you are. The more hours you work, the less productive you are. The productivity is not in the like running a machine, but it all comes from your mind, your brain. The brain will be more active and more effective when you are, at leisure, with less stress. The more entertainment you have in your life, the more productive you are. That's a new idea, but that's only in Europe. That's only maybe partially in America. But in China, for example, you know that workers are working for 12 hours or 13 hours now. That's a country run by a party which is known as a workers' party. And people are working 12 hours. Most of you must have seen recently pictures of a factory owner asking the workers to crawl on a public road where traffic was still on because the production targets were not met. Can you imagine such a thing in any other civilized country? If you hear stories of similar action by the factory owners during Industrial Revolution, 1800s, you would still say how cruel they would be. But such things still happen in China. And that's a government, that's where a communist party, which is a workers' party, is now ruling. The original idea of the Mayday, that's what I was trying to say. The original idea of the Mayday was for establishing an 8-hour working day for the workers. That is why they wanted to celebrate this day. No, in fact, little more, specifically if you say, there was a struggle for that, there was a general strike for that, for getting the work limited to 8 hours. That was in the United States. And some people were killed. And therefore, the European working class, the European leaders of the workers' movement decided to celebrate that as a Workers' Day internationally. And they identified a popular festival that was established on that day. And they declared that to be the Workers' Day. But ironically, the most exploited workers are in communist countries. The most exploited workers. One can say their living standards are better than many underdeveloped countries. But the idea that triggered the idea of the growth of the working class, that workers need rest, they need leisure, they are people. That is not respected in countries which are ruled by the communist parties. What an irony. But the whole idea has actually, it had an influence in the present, absolutely considerate, one can say, as compared to other countries. Still, I would not say that, it's absolutely perfect because it needs still a lot of improvement. Workers' positions are to be improved everywhere because there are new ideas and new values and new approaches coming about the time of the work and the working hours. There is an idea which is getting popular is people need not go to offices, but they can work from their homes. And there they would be more productive. And they can do when they have a mood to work. There's a flow of work when it runs, one can go on working. And when there is no flow of work, they should relax. And that's the new kind of idea which is getting popular. Maybe a post-corona times new idea about working hours is also developing very fast. Many huge companies decide that their workers need not come over there. They can be anywhere in the world and they can still work. There are new big transformations are happening in the field of the working hours and working quality and the quality of life that is to be provided to workers. But these influences of big changes in the welfare states partially was influenced by the big threat that Soviet Union has made. Soviet Union made a threat of absorbing all other countries and uprising of the working class and using violence and taking over these countries and making them as part of a huge Soviet Union was a big threat. So they kept out Soviet Union and taken care of the workers in their countries and improved the quality of life of these people. So therefore, the life quality of the workers in Europe has increased. It declined in Soviet Union. It declined in China. It declined in Vietnam. It declined in many other communist countries. It declined in Korea, but it enhanced in those countries which they call bourgeois. That's how history sometimes reacts. But interestingly, I would still say the idea of finding a day for the workers was a brilliant idea, because the role of the worker in production of wealth and production of capital was not respected at that time. That was a time the uprising of the socialist movement and the social democratic movement, and even the communist movement, has been a big contribution in establishing the right of the workers. And that was to be heard, and that was a historic contribution they have done. But bringing that to a contemporary society and trying to establish ideas that existed in 1700s and 1800s in modern times is something not tenable, but the historic role that this movement has contributed to improve or enhance the working quality of people in countries that are not ruled by communist parties is something very, very important. In many countries, this day is not the Workers' Day. For example, in the United States, there is an International Workers' Day. Or in Canada, for example, the Labor Day is the first Monday in September. I think it was in United States and Canada, the Labor Day is the first Monday of September. This day is not taken there, not by the workers there. So at the end of the day, what I would try to figure out or try to conclude would be the patterns that religions follow to hijack the traditional festivals of people and stabilize it with their faith, with giving some additional colors that fit to their faith, was a pattern that was very prevalent in the Roman Empire. And they have hijacked many traditional festivals. But the political ideologies of many things similar to religion also tried something on the same pattern, which became very successful. So there is nothing wrong about that. That's how most of these festivals came. If you take any single festival anywhere in the world, you can see that there are similar festivals in the same season in some other part of the world with some other different tradition and mythology connected to it. And it's no matter, but these are people's festival. One good example I would always tell with an example of Diwali festival in India. It's a festival of lights, most of the time coming in November. In northern India, that's a festival of Ram returning from the Great War, a great imaginary war with the people in Lanka. Whose king was Ravana. And if you go to Western Bengal, that was the victory of Durga over Mahishasura. When you go to southern India, that was a festival of Lakshmi, a festival in connection with wealth. So these all are the same practically. This was the festival of a season change. Every single culture, every religious tradition tried to add a mythological story to that and tried to bring it in their flavor. And people who believed followed it, and others tried to abstain it because they thought it was all religious. But in fact, this was a people's festival, which was taken by different faiths at different times. These all were different faiths. The worship of Shiva, or the worship of Vishnu, or worship of Shakti, all these were different faiths. Later on, these are all known into one frame, which is known as Hinduism. Similarly, the same festival of Easter is a festival in southern India or many other parts of India as an equinox festival, Vishuva. It's a festival, or a Sankranti for many people. So these are all similar, same festivals people follow. Religions use this strategy of taking it into their fold and giving a narrative fitting to their stories or their plans or their dreams or their ideas. But political ideologies also do the same thing. They hijack popular festivals and give a narrative fitting their political aspirations and political goals. So all these, in a way, if you compare the major religions and major political ideologies, there are a lot of similarities. You can see a lot of similarities with Islam and the communist movement. For example, with the Third International, what they have been trying was exactly like Islam's goal to defeat the whole world with one ideology. You can also see elements of Christianity in political ideologies. So ideology is another religion. When there is an ideology which is not questionable, which is not verifiable, which is ultimately truth, and which cannot be modified, whose fundamental tenets are stabilized, and if that remains unchangeable, basic premises are stable without any change. That is religiosity, practically. So ideologies are similar like religions. And Mayday is another festival which, same like Emperor Constantine tried with Christmas or Easter. So nothing very special. Easter, in fact, was not celebrated in the earlier times of Christianity. 12th century onwards, one would see that this festival is greatly absorbed into the Christian tradition. But in any way, these methods are very, very popular. But that doesn't mean that we have to abstain from this festival, even if we don't follow these political ideologies which try to hijack it. I'll tell you one small story from Finland with this particular day, which is Mayday for many people. This festival is known as Vappu in Finland. In Sweden, that's a Flowers Day. In Finland, this is a Students' Day. The most important value for Finland is education. It gives enormous importance to education. Therefore, this day is for students and for everybody who is getting a graduation from the high school. And when you become a graduate from a school, you get a white cap. On Vappu Day, that's how Finns call it, everywhere you can see hundreds and hundreds of children with these white caps of graduation. But not only children, elders who would like to remember about their graduation would also come to the huge crowd with their old white caps. There would be the families get together all with white caps, and they sit outside in the parks and drink coffee or wine or champagne and tell stories and celebrate or dance. In fact, yesterday night onwards in Finland, there have been celebrations going on. A very interesting celebration on Vappu is again connected with the school graduation. There is a very famous statue in the city, Amanda statue. It's a nude lady standing in the city. On a crane, students would go up and they would put a graduation cap on this statue's head. That's a huge celebration, symbolic that education is the most important value. This year, there was an additional thing. Along with this graduation cap, they have given a symbolic corona vaccination for the statues to show the importance of vaccination. And people were singing and dancing all throughout the city. This morning, I've been out to show my grandchild these celebrations in the city. Everywhere, people were, flocking everywhere with white caps. Many places, children and their parents and all their friends were dancing together. It's a celebration of education, of knowledge, of beginning of summer, the most important time for the whole countries where life is most active. So it's a day to celebrate for a lot of people from times immemorial. Let's celebrate this day. Don't leave it to any ideology. Don't leave it to any faith. It's people's festival, beginning of a new time, beginning of a new season. And that's to be celebrated. If you don't believe in an ideology, that should not stop you celebrating this great day. When Workers' Day is to be celebrated. Workers of all sorts are important. And they are part of the wealth building of our country. With whatever country you are living in. They are producing wealth. They are producing the wealth of nations. And they are running the economy. So therefore, whether it is a workers' day, whether it's a Florida's day, whether it's a summer beginning day, whether it's a day of education, whatever it is, it's a day for celebration. So let's celebrate. Thank you very much.
So thank you so much. And now we will move on to the question answer round. Click on the hand raise tool icon for asking. And as usual, please be precise with your question. And we also have Clubhouse link with us. So we'll take up questions from both the platforms. So we have Kunjama Matthew on Clubhouse. I would just ask you to proceed.
Good evening. Thanks for the great talk. I don't have a question for myself, but I greatly appreciate your talk that you taught us about the history and importance of Mayday. Thank you very much. And also, since you started this Clubhouse and Zoom close to 3 years, I learned a lot of things from your speech. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mrs. Kunyama. You are traveling now in India?
No, I am back.
Back in United States. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, application call for distress. I am in distress. That is a code name. It's
Okay.
a pilot and a helicopter.
Okay.
He's on a distress mode and he will send the voice message. Mayday, mayday, mayday. That is the point.
I'm not aware of that. If you know something, please tell.
Yeah, this is the code. This is the rate code for a distress. When it is by something or climate change happening or a machine pull, a helicopter or a flight or a ship, the captain or the operator, he will send a message made on particular frequency. That means,
yeah, please. Yeah.
That means we are in distress. Please help us. It is another code is there in the telegraph code SOS.
SOS, I know. Yeah.
Yeah. So in the telephony version, voice version, it is called Mayday.
I don't think it's connected with this festival. I mean, at least I haven't heard about it. It could be a coincidence of word similarities, but I haven't heard about it at least. I mean, I'm totally unaware of that. I mean, SOS I know, but this term I am not aware about. But interestingly, another interesting factor that all ideologies and religions work in the same way. When this Mayday became very popular, especially after Soviet Union came into being, this Mayday was promoted in all of the East, especially after the Second World War, the Eastern Bloc emerging. So Mayday became very popular in these Communist Party ruled countries, and it was promoted officially. So eventually, the Catholic Church immediately finds that, we are not part of this festival. There is no story for us. Most of the festivals, they make a story fitting to them, fitting to the festival. So 1955, the Catholic Church officially decided that this is St. Joseph the Worker, the day of St. Joseph the Worker. And they made St. Joseph a patron saint, who is a saint of workers and craftsmen, among others. So where Catholic Church is powerful in Latin American countries, they try to celebrate this day as the patron Saint Joseph's Day, who is a saint of workers and craftsmen. So the church tries to capture it from one side, one munch for us also. So it's a classical case.
On Zoom, we have Sakti with us. I would ask you to unmute yourself and proceed.
Hi, I just wanted to add one more point about the Mayday distress call. I was just reading that the distress call actually came as late as 1920s, and it was from a French word which phonetically is Maydays, and hence it sounds like Mayday, but the distress call came in much later in 1920s, and it's from a French word. So it is, as you rightly said, it is not in connection with the May Day or the Labor Day celebration, but a separate, it sounds like the French word.
Thank you, Shakti, for that. Yeah.
Okay.
So thank you so much, everybody. I think everybody is done with their questions. Thank you for participating, and thank you everybody for listening and understanding what it is about. And thank you, Sanal sir, for presenting it to all of us. We will come up with more socially relevant topics next week. So see you all next week.
Thank you, Shubhi. Thank you, all those who are moderating on the Clubhouse. Thank you, everyone. See you next week.